I've owned 5 iPhones at this point, but I've not reviewed any, because it's always the same. The camera is always slightly better, but not quite there in terms of processing. The performance is always slightly faster, but not in a hugely noticeable way, and so on and so forth. With the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, for the first time in years, there's actually something different, and dare I say exciting. So in this mini review, let me tell you all about the new features of the 14 Pro series and what I think of them. First of all, I want to talk about the cameras, because they are simultaneously the biggest and least improved area. The main shooter, for the first time since the iPhone 6s, has had a megapixel bump, from 12 megapixels to 48. That is a number that's divisible by 4, which means it has a quad Bayer filter. What does this mean? Well, in theory, it's supposed to allow for better low-light photos by enlarging the size of the pixels and also boosting the sharpness of the photo. Furthermore, the new photonic engine is supposed to boost the sharpness and clarity of photos taken in mid to low light conditions too. But let's move away from the buzzwords. How is the picture quality? I have noticed that the images do seem to be sharper than on the 13 Pro Max in terms of texture detail. However, distant detail still looks like it belongs on a 4-year-old iPhone. Things are muddy and over-sharpened at the same time. Furthermore, now your photos are riddled with artifacts from the post-processing stack. Like look at this fencing and the text on this mailbox. Don't get me wrong, the Pixel 6 Pro was also not great with distant detail, and its AI upscaler for digital crop did result in a lot of artifacting as well. But I was just hoping that Apple would have started fresh with a new sensor. Instead, the images look pretty much the same as on multiple generations before, if not worse actually, with all this artifacting. But on the complete opposite spectrum is the Pro RAW mode, that turns the iPhone camera into not only the best iPhone camera, but one of the best in Android space too. This is because it utilizes the full 48 megapixels, and the difference is night and day, no competition. Now, I've always said that the best way to make your iPhone pictures look presentable is by shooting RAW and editing on Lightroom. Normally I said this because I didn't like the color rendition of iPhone shots. Thankfully, since the 13, we do have photographic styles that help you give the shots a bit of personality. But now, you will want to shoot the full 48 megapixel photos for the quality improvement alone. No weird artifacts on the fence, and you can actually read what the postbox says, and even make out the InPost logo. These images are more comparable to a dedicated camera than ever before, and despite RAW photos still having the processing stack for things such as HDR, I am glad that Apple gets rid of the awful noise reduction and sharpening that they have for the JPEGs. I believe this is one of the largest sensors in a smartphone, minus the 1-inch sensor on phones from Sony, Sharp and Xiaomi, and it's a massive boost over the 13 Pro Max. What does this mean for you then? Other than the improved low-light performance that comes with a bigger sensor, natural bokeh is another thing to look out for, as it looks fantastic, and even when your subject is quite far away, you still get a lot of separation between the foreground and the background. Something else that is a night and day improvement over the last generation is macro mode. The ultra-wide shooter wasn't the sharpest on the planet, and with the phone needing to crop when going to macro to match the focal length of the main cam, it meant that the pictures overall went super sharp. However, with the improved wide-angle sensor here, the photo quality is nothing short of amazing. Furthermore, even though I moan about the post-processing, I found that cropping from the 3x lens results in sharper photos, as the ones on the 13 Pro Max look like they went through an AI upscaler with how overly smooth they were. It's still the exact same camera, it's just the processing stack has been improved. You can now shoot 4K cinematic video, and there is a new action mode that reminds me of the Pixel 6 Pro's stabilization options. Cool if that's your thing. I never used those modes on the Pixel because the stabilization was good enough, and I won't be using it here either. Also, it crops from 4K to 2.8K. 4K 60 recording also still results in you being unable to switch lenses when recording, because the best-in-class smartphone SoC is still not powerful enough to do that. 128GB models can't shoot ProRes above 1080p 30. I know the files are big, but I wish it allowed me to choose what resolution I want to shoot. Also, how can I forget? One of the main gripes with the Pixel 6 Pro was that between 1x and 4x, it would crop into the 12 megapixel image instead of the full 50 megapixel image. This is something that Apple does with the 14 Pro, so between 1x and 3x, you don't lose much quality at all, which is amazing. Also, the Pixel 7 Pro now does the same thing too, just to spite me. The front-facing camera has also had multiple improvements. It's still the same resolution and sensor size, but thanks to autofocus, no longer do the pictures look soft with no detail. And it also supposedly has OIS, and also has a wider aperture, for sharper images in low light. Okay, let's move away from the cameras and talk about the second biggest change, and that's the always-on display. This is something that Android users love about their phones, and you can see why. We're way past the point of having notification LEDs on your phone, well except for Sony, but still. It's nice to be able to see at a glance if you have received a new notification without having to tap the display. Apple's implementation is beautiful to look at, but completely useless at the function it's meant to serve. I mean, seeing your photos come to life, or seeing animations on live wallpapers move about like it's a Xiaomi phone, it's so awesome to see. But that's also the issue. On Android, every always-on implementation has had a basic clock with notification icons under it. It's easy at a glance to see if something new has appeared. But the way iPhone users are used to getting notified about a new notification is by having the whole display light up. Do you see the issue? The display is always lit up, and at a quick glance, it's impossible to tell that it's in a locked state. The amount of times I got distracted at work because I thought I had a new notification come through, the always-on display became always off for me. I like it at home to see what music is playing and for checking the time without needing to unlock the display, but that's mainly it. The screen also has 0 pixel shift. Apple says they don't need it. I say they do, because I've had 2 iPhones get sold or returned because of burn-in issues. I do not trust Apple on this. It also sucks that you don't even have the basic option of choosing when the display should come on during the day like every Android phone has. I don't think you can even choose to have it off in a specific focus mode. And there's no quick toggle for it either. It just feels so half-baked. What's slightly less half-baked is the new Dynamic Island. If you haven't used it before, the best way to describe it, it's a mini notification shade that shows you your timers, your active media, and it also gets used for system notifications like your AirPods battery level, silent mode toggle, focus mode toggle, etc. While I appreciate Apple has finally consolidated all of their different pop-up boxes into one, it's not really all that useful otherwise. The developers now finally have a way to take advantage of the island, but I can't think of how this may be used by most of the apps I have installed. The Dynamic Island is simultaneously very Apple and unlike Apple. The former mainly because of the beautiful animations and a deep system integration, but the latter, it really feels like a gimmick out of Samsung's or LG's book from back in the day. Remember Edge notifications or those little squircle notification pop-ups? It just reminds me of that. It does feel like change for the sake of change, but at least they are doing something with the pill, instead of having its sole purpose be taking up more of your screen real estate than the notch of the past. Oh yeah, also the screen feels more cramped on the 14 Pro, with the pill usually eating into your status icons. This isn't really a full-on review, as I've only owned this phone for 5 days as of writing this script, but I'll tell you what I know. The battery life coming from the 13 Pro Max is a big downgrade. I can finish a 12-hour long shift at work with some battery remaining, but not much, while with the 13 Pro Max it was impossible to kill it in one day. The screen is about twice as bright as the previous generation, and this is immediately noticeable. I've also performed a drop test on this phone, 12 hours after I got it, without a case. Phone fell out my lap onto the hard floor, and you can see 2 tiny dents on the corner of the phone, before landing on the back with no cracks or scratches on the camera lens. I know I haven't touched every aspect of the phone, but the things I haven't spoken about really haven't changed since the last generation. So I guess I'll see you guys in the next 4 to 5 years for the next iPhone review when Apple does something different in the lineup. Jokes aside, I think the 14 Pro is the final form of the iPhone for years to come, because I genuinely can't think of where they can go from here. Maybe a periscope internal zoom telephoto lens, maybe always on Shazam, maybe reverse charging for the AirPods, obviously the move to Type-C. But the 14 Pro not only gets the basics right like all of its predecessors, it finally is top of the class competing with other flagship Android phones that have also hit their stagnation point a year or so ago. Regardless, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you have. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.